Hey babe, I heard you are a clever and curious girl and you want to know more about politics and all these different thinkers, so don't worry, I got you. We're going to be talking about Robin Kelley, Black Study, Black So basically, fighting for diversity and inclusion really doesn't do much in terms of fighting against racism and, dismantling all these oppressive structures, and it's kind of futile for a lot of these students to do so. Kelley starts off the essay basically talking about how there's a lot of black students who don't feel happy within university. They don't feel like there's a protective administration for them, and they don't feel welcome because, they're black students within this predominantly white space. So as a result, they end up fighting for things like more diversity and inclusion within university. They want more students and staff of color along with more mental health support, and they also don't want statues dedicated to racist old white men. However, Kelley points out the flaw in this. She specifically says that integration alone is not enough. And you might be thinking like, bro, Kelley, like what the fuck? We need more people of color within university. Like what the hell? However, she's low-key onto something, and I'm going to tell you why. Kelley sympathizes with the students that want greater diversity and inclusion within university because obviously they're naturally going to want to feel like they belong in university. Universities, they advertise themselves as this place where you're going to find your family. They, that meme where you sit on the grass with your multicultural group of friends, like on all the brochures. And of course, black people are so alienated, they want to look to university for that safe space, but they just don't find it because at the end of the day, it's a university which is so deeply entrenched in the colonial system. So many places, like for example, my university, I literally found this out, but Thomas Guy, which Guy's campus is named after, he was like a deep investor in the South Sea Company, aka a slave trading company, which is why Kelley believes that universities is never going to be this like engine for social reform. However, what Kelley specifically noticed about these black activists is that a lot of their activism stems from a language of trauma. Their history and their identity and their blackness is basically bubbled down to them being a victim to slavery and all like systemic racism and all. And the problem with that to Kelley is that they don't believe that they're agents of their own fate. Like they're not like autonomous beings with their own free will. Like because they're only victims, they can only ever be on the receiving end of structural racism, whereas like Kelley believes they have the power to fight back. And by reducing the black experience to simply just trauma is such an easy fucking lazy way for universities to evade responsibility, because they can easily come up with some bullshit like, oh yeah, look at this exclusive bursary that we're only giving to like black students, look at this like compulsory course that we're giving everybody to teach them about diversity and inclusion, look, we're not racist. However, to Kelley, trauma, by talking about trauma, it's basically an independent problem. It's a problem of the individual's psychological state. Like it is not the result of this deep systemic oppression. It's just a you problem. Like, the university solution is typically managing trauma, aka these compulsory courses, or multiculturalism, which is basically shoving a bunch of black and brown students within the university space, aka a predominantly white space, like as proof like, oh, we're not racist. It's a fucking cheap way out for universities, because like by managing trauma and managing and shoving a bunch of black and brown people within university, they don't actually acknowledge the fact and how they are complicit within structural racism. Kelley says that multiculturalism basically only maintains the system. For example, think Barack Obama, yeah, bro, was the first black president, but was he any different from his predecessors when it came to bombing up the Middle East? That's an example of multiculturalism. You have a black man in a white man's shoes. However, did he change anything? He maintained the same system of oppression. Multiculturalism focuses on mixing like a bunch of people within the melting pot that is university, rather than changing these like oppressive systems, or at least acknowledging that they're part of these systems. Kelley takes after James Baldwin and his sort of theory and his emphasis on self-love within the black community, because they both believe that self-love is what's going to motivate us to go to the root of these oppressive structures and actually begin like deconstructing them. You can see how much Kelley was influenced by James Baldwin and his theory on love in his essay, because he talks about these like intellectual groups and study groups, something like literally like what I'm telling you right now. But he's part of these study groups where he was part of this community, a study group, but it was this community built on love, like this principle of love. They're all bonded by the collective struggle. And he talks about how he's introduced to all these radical thinkers who still hold up today, for example, Franz Fanon or Lenin, and how it really self-radicalized him. And he ends the essay with talking about his students at UCLA, which is where he teaches at, where they're taking on the same values, where they are part of their own study groups, and they are also fighting back against the university and how they are complicit within systemic racism. So the main gist of Kelley's essay is that sort of students like me should use the resources of the university, for example, whether it's the critical thinking skills were offered, I don't know, going to the libraries, going textbook, and engaging within that thinking and building up on it. For example, the way I'm speaking to this about you and broadening your perspective and your learning more. And like in that way we can fight, like we're creating this community of fighting against oppression. And yeah, that's basically it, to be honest. I mean, if you want to know more, I can tell you more. But anyways, Queen, I hope this was a really great learning experience for you. I hope your curiosity was satiated and you go on learning about more things and going into study groups of your own.